Adam and Eve are two of the most well-known people in the entire Bible. They were the very first humans that God created, the ones who sinned against him by eating the forbidden fruit, and the ones who were banished from the Garden of Eden. But let's be honest, you probably knew all those things already, didn't you? Well, it's time for you to learn something new about these two lovebirds, which is why today I'm going to cover 3 unique facts about Adam and Eve that you need to know. So the first fact about Adam and Eve is that they are the parents of many firsts. They raised the first murderer, the first martyr, and the first one to start the messianic lineage. Let's break this down. The Bible mentions 3 of Adam and Eve's children by name: Cain, Abel, and Seth, and they're all unique in their own way. Not only are they the first children named in the Bible, they're also credited as the first to do certain things. We'll start with Cain. He's traditionally recognized as the first son and is most well known for murdering his younger brother Abel after getting upset about God rejecting his sacrifice while accepting Abel's. So to make a long story short, Cain was the first murderer. I already have an entire video covering this, so if you're interested in learning more, then click the video link in the description box below. Now let's look at Abel. After dedicating a sacrifice to God that the Lord found pleasing, Abel was murdered by his brother Cain. And although we don't hear too much more about Abel, he is mentioned thousands of years later in the New Testament in both Luke chapter 11 and Hebrews chapter 11. In these passages, Abel is recognized as someone who died for his faith in God. Because of this, Abel is often considered the first martyr who died because of his faith. So Cain was the first murderer, Abel was the first martyr, but what about Seth? Well, unfortunately, not enough people know that Seth was the first one to usher in the messianic lineage. To be more specific, it was Seth's offspring, his seed, that Jesus Christ would be born from thousands of years later. In fact, through Adam and Eve's children, we see 2 paths diverge from their offspring in Genesis 4. While Cain's offspring were the first to make advancements in innovation and civilization, Seth's offspring focused more on the spirit and dedicated themselves to God. So yeah, not a lot of Christians know these things about Cain, Abel, and Seth. Adam and Eve didn't just have the first children, they also were the parents of many firsts. The first murderer, the first martyr, and the first to start the messianic lineage. The second interesting fact about Adam and Eve is that they were mercifully banned from the Garden of Eden. Key word being mercifully. This is one of those facts that not enough Christians know about when reading the story of Adam and Eve, but they really should. When people read Genesis chapter 3, they tend to assume that Adam and Eve's banishment from Eden was only a part of their punishment. But the truth is actually much deeper than that. You see, when Adam and Eve took the forbidden fruit, they only ate from the tree of knowledge. But let's not forget that there was another tree in the garden called the tree of life. Both of the fruit from these trees did different things. The fruit from the tree of knowledge would cause Adam and Eve to understand the difference between good and evil, while the fruit from the tree of life would cause them to live forever. When Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, they also corrupted their souls in the process. It turns out that this was the price they had to pay in order to gain this type of knowledge. The other price they had to pay was that their bodies would now begin to die. Prior to eating from the tree of knowledge, Adam and Eve were able to live forever in innocence, only knowing what is good. But after gaining knowledge of evil too, their bodies began to die and their souls devolved further into sin. However, let's not forget that the tree of life was still in the garden too. Adam and Eve could have easily eaten from this tree and lived forever in a physical, eternal state. This sounds great, doesn't it? Who wouldn't want to live forever? Well, the problem is that if they ate from this tree, then they wouldn't just live forever, they would live forever in sin, separated from God. Obviously, this is something that God did not want for his creation. So what did God do? As soon as Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, he banned them from the garden so they wouldn't be able to eat from the tree of life and live forever in sin. Instead, God allowed them to physically die slowly over time, so while their bodies would eventually pass away in sin, their spirit could still live on in the hopes of a better afterlife. In other words, God banned Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden so that he could prepare a way for them to have eternal salvation in Jesus Christ. So it turns out that God was actually showing mercy to Adam and Eve by banishing them from the Garden of Eden. He was protecting them from eternal damnation and instead began paving an alternative way for them to receive redemption through Jesus Christ. Which brings me to the third and final fact about Adam and Eve that you might not have known, which is this. Adam and Eve's punishment ushered in the first messianic prophecy. You may remember that as soon as Adam and Eve admitted to eating the forbidden fruit, God immediately responded by punishing both them and the serpent. But even in the midst of their punishment, God hinted that he was going to create a path toward redemption for both Adam and Eve and their offspring. He does this in the form of a prophecy that's outlined in Genesis 3:15, which says this, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." When you first read this, it's easy to overlook the prophetic message. So let's break it down. Here, God is talking to the serpent, the one who tempted Adam and Eve, and who most theologians identify as Satan himself. So you have to keep in mind that when you read the words you and your in this verse, it's being addressed to the serpent. When you read it that way, it sounds a lot different. God put enmity, which is a word that expresses hostility and hatred, between the serpent and the woman. And not just the serpent and the woman, but the offspring of the serpent and the offspring of the woman. So who is the offspring of the serpent and the offspring of the woman? Well, the offspring of the serpent, or Satan, would be anybody who's living in sin. And the offspring of Eve is, well, pretty much everybody. Eve is the mother of all the living. That's actually the meaning of her name. So if we use exegesis, we learn that in this verse, God is pretty much saying this: from here on out, all mankind, offspring of Eve, will be in constant turmoil with all of Satan's forces, offspring of the serpent. But the key messianic prophecy I'm talking about is actually mentioned in the next statement. He will crush your head and you will strike his heel. Instead of speaking in a more generalized way about a large offspring, God now speaks in a more specific manner. He will crush your head. So who is the he and your God is referring to here? Well, he's talking to the serpent, so that answers the your part. But the word he here actually refers to Jesus Christ himself. The reason we can infer this is because the text says that the seed will come from her offspring. The text makes it clear that the one who will crush the head of the serpent will come from the seed of a woman, not the seed of a man. This unique phrasing suggests that the man who will crush the head of the serpent will not have a father. And there's only one man who has ever lived throughout history who did not have an earthly father, and his name is Jesus Christ. So back to Genesis 3:15. The text is saying the serpent will strike the heel of Jesus Christ, but that Jesus Christ would bruise or crush the head of the serpent. So what does this mean? Well, here God is actually foretelling the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Yes, Satan did strike Jesus Christ when he was crucified on the cross, but Jesus Christ crushed the power of sin by raising himself from the dead, demonstrating his superiority and fulfilling the path for redemption that was promised thousands of years before in Genesis 3:15. In other words, Satan may have struck Jesus Christ, but it was ultimately Christ who crushed the head of the serpent. This is one of the most powerful prophecies in the scriptures, not only because it happened so early in the Bible, but because many people refer to it as the Protoevangelium, which means the first gospel. Not only is this the first gospel message in the Bible, but it's also presented immediately after sin first entered into the world. And that tells us something really important, which is this: God always had a plan for salvation, and he made that plan known as soon as sin entered into the world. And that plan still remains in place today. It's a plan that was made specifically for you. You're a part of the same offspring that was mentioned in Genesis 3:15. And the path that was made for your redemption is still available to you at this very moment. And if you're tired of living in sin and you feel that there's something better out there for you, I'm here to tell you that there is. Today, I encourage you to reject sin, open yourself up to Jesus Christ, and allow yourself to be transformed into the person that you were meant to be, the person that you should be, and the person that you were called to be. Amen. Don't close the video just yet. Make sure to click the like and subscribe button so that way you can keep up to date with all the work that we're doing here at What's the Word. Also, feel free to leave a comment down below and maybe even share this video with others. Who knows? Maybe it'll be a blessing to somebody that you know. Anyway, I appreciate you all and I hope you have a wonderful day. God bless.